Welcome to the second round of the Medfield TV Meet the Candidate special for school committee. In the first round, we introduced our candidates to the residents of Medfield, and in this round, we're having the candidates respond to both questions from the public as well as questions from each other. A brief rundown of how each show will go. This episode will run from start to finish unedited. Candidates will get as much time as they need to answer questions and respond to comments. We will open the questions from our viewers. They were selected based on submissions from Facebook, and we selected the most liked comments as of the deadline on March 8th. It should be noted that Medfield TV did break any ties within the comments. We will then have candidates respond to comments made during the first round of interviews, 2 from each candidate. You will see not only the clip, but also the candidate's reaction and response unedited. Today, I'd like to welcome first school committee candidate, Robert Worth. Robert, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get right into it. We're going to start with some of the questions from our public, and they were on the Facebook page. I don't know if you were following that, but our first question is from one of our top fans on our Facebook page. That's Lauren. She says, if elected to the school committee, how will you work towards making our schools more inclusive for all students?
It's an excellent question. Inclusivity in schools is a top priority of mine, and it has always been a priority as I've worked in schools, both as a teacher and as an administrator. When I think about inclusivity in schools and including everyone in the community in schools, making everyone feel welcome in schools, and making the schools equitable, I think not only about our students, but also about their families and everyone in the community. Inclusivity in schools begins with a school culture. Developing a strong school culture that is welcoming to everyone in the community is the first step to make schools inclusive for everybody. Inclusivity is also tied strongly to achievement, so it's important that we look at inclusivity in schools and think about how we're approaching this for the benefit of all of our students. When students feel welcome in schools, their families feel engaged in the process of their learning as well. We've seen this historically in schools. We've also seen it heightened during the pandemic when families have been involved more than ever in children's education. Schools that have welcomed families well into their students' education have succeeded in engaging those families in the remote learning aspect of hybrid learning, or for families that were fully remote, in that remote learning engagement through Google Meets, Zoom meetings, and other remote learning interests. Inclusive schools make sure that everyone feels welcome when they come in, and that really starts with the culture, but it's across the board in every classroom, making sure that when students are walking through the hallways going to class, they feel welcome, they feel included in the school, making sure that the curriculum is reflective of all of the students and all of the community members, and making sure that everyone feels welcome and able to participate in school fully. I also think about equity when I think about inclusion. How are we distributing resources in schools? And what does equity look like in our schools? One of the topics that's recently come up in school committee meetings is potentially adding in bus fees. When I think about inclusion and equity, this is something that I think about a lot. I've been in districts that have bus fees. I've worked in districts that have been able to remove bus fees. I do think that bus fees, even though there's a waiver component, can create exclusion in schools and can create inequitable situations where students don't have full access to schools. So I think every aspect of school is important when we're looking at policy and budget. And bus fees are an excellent example of that because it's something that will come up at a school committee meeting. And my feeling about it is that districts like Medfield and other districts as well should not have bus fees because they are an exclusion to some families and some students. And they do have a negative impact on learning when students are not able to attend school regularly because they're not able to take the transportation that they need to get to school and to go home from school.
It's fantastic. This is one of the reasons why I actually love the open answer. I feel like you can give a real solid answer there and a real solid response. So thank you for that. Our next question comes from Jackie. She says, do you think teachers' unions influence school committee elections? And if so, what is the impact to schools?
In my knowledge, working in schools, working with school committees, and previously being a part of a teachers union, I don't have any knowledge of a way that a school committee election would be impacted by a teachers union. However, I do know that teachers unions make up a big part of the school committee decisions that are made, and some of the decisions that are made in school committee policy. School committees, however, do not interact directly with teachers unions often. And this question led me to think about why there would ever be involvement from a teachers union in a school committee election. The only reason that I could come up with would be that teachers were not happy, or teachers did not feel respected, and the teachers who were part of that union, who lived in the community of Medfield, felt like they had to, and they do have a right to, participate in the election in a democratic society, and voice their opinion as residents and as members of the school community. However, I don't have any knowledge of any impact that the teachers union in Medfield has had on this election or previous elections, and I don't have any knowledge of this being an issue that has been raised in other surrounding towns or districts.
Fantastic. We'll finish up with our third question from our residents. This one comes from Minta. It was our most popular question that was asked. It says, please discuss how you have been involved in Medfield Public Schools or Medfield Town Government prior to running for school committee. As a parent, a volunteer, on what committees have you been on, meetings, etc.?
This is a great question. My wife and I moved to Medfield about 1.5 years ago. We have 2 young daughters who will not be in school for the next 3 years. So I do have a vested interest in the schools. In the 1.5 years that I've lived in town, I've tried to be involved in the schools just by participating in the school committee meetings, watching the school committee meetings, participating in other local government, speaking with elected officials and other town residents. I've also joined and I'm endorsed by a group called Medfield Together, which is an advocacy group for inclusion, equity, and social justice in our schools. And I'm really proud of the work that they've been doing, advocating for inclusion and equity in our schools. I also, when we first moved to town, I was part of a group, New in Town. That was a great group of new residents in Medfield, and it gave them an opportunity to meet other residents and speak with other residents. My wife and I were thrilled to attend some of their social gatherings, to be able to meet some other people that were in town. I do have a passion for education and a deep knowledge and a background in education. I've worked in schools for over a decade, both as a teacher and now as an administrator. I am deeply interested in being a part of the Medfield community and the Medfield School Committee. I've told people again and again that my passion for schools is driving my candidacy. I do feel like I have something deep to offer to the community. Serving on a school committee has always been something that I've been interested in. My wife and I love being in Medfield. We live right off of South Street, right near the downtown. We love the community feel. We love being a part of the community. And I will be a part of the schools in some way, whether it's through a PTO or another organization or school committee in the future. If I'm not elected through this election, I am committed to being a part of the community and being a part of the decisions that are made that impact our students.
Awesome. Something tells me that no matter what happens in this election, you're going to get involved in the town. They're going to make you get involved.
I surely will.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're now going to move into where you're going to respond to some of the comments that were made. Again, these were simple things that were from the videos that we did in the first round. So these are, if you've watched those videos, you've seen these clips yourself. The first one is going to be from Leo Brem on what he was most proud of during his time as school committee.
Yeah, I've been really pleased with two big things that I think are that were important to me when running the last time. One was around class sizes. and paying attention to those class sizes. I think that previously, because Medfield is is considered a high-performing school district, sometimes attention to some of those details slips, and I think it's an important part of what I call the core values of running a school district. In previous school districts that I've worked in, class size was a very important item. It was not uncommon to have to hire new teachers even 1 week before school started because the class sizes creeped up too large, and we would post and hire additional teacher for that grade level to lower the number of the kids in those classrooms. The other item I was very passionate about was our curriculum. Prior to the pandemic, it was very hard to find any of the curriculum that was being conducted in the classrooms available to parents, or even a guide to understand just about what they're supposed to be tackling in any given school year. Now, being a lifelong educator, I have an idea of what the big ideas are across all subject areas at every grade level. Most parents do not, and it's something that the schools should provide, is an organized idea to parents so that they can help support that learning at home. In my two previous school districts I spent most of my career in, also considered high-performing districts, that curriculum being available was extremely important because we want to enable parents to be able to help support what's happening in school.
So Leo makes an excellent point about both class sizes and curriculum. When we're thinking about class sizes and we're thinking about the time that a teacher spends with their students, it is essential that that class size is manageable and that students are able to get the differentiated learning and instruction that they need throughout the day to be able to learn and make progress individually. Everyone has individual learning needs, and a class size that is small is able to accommodate those individual learning needs. From the standpoint of a school committee, this can be achieved by taking a look at a budget and prioritizing teachers and school support staff to maintain small class sizes. But it can't be done alone. It requires the collaboration of the entire community. When we're thinking about class sizes and the future of class sizes, we're looking at projections for the future. Not just next year, not just the 5 years ahead of us, but even 10 years in the future. What is that going to look like? And how do we prepare to maintain those class sizes and make them sustainable for the future? It's a really important part of looking at a budget and being critical of that budget and thinking about how we're able to serve our students well. Small class sizes do allow teachers to be able to get to know their students well as well, and their families. We've seen this year in the hybrid model that a lot of schools have adapted. Those small class sizes have been difficult because the other students are at home, but they've also been slightly beneficial in that the teachers get to know their students very well, working with very small class sizes that are essentially half of what a normal class size would be. So this has been a really interesting year thinking about how class sizes do impact students' advancement and achievement in school and how they allow teachers to really get to know their students. So class sizes are definitely a priority when we're looking at a budget as a school committee. When we're thinking about curriculum and how families are engaged in that curriculum and educated about the curriculum in schools, I couldn't agree more with Leo. It is extremely important that families have access and it's easily understood. It's not presented in a way that is overwhelming. In the past, I've seen some districts put curriculum resources on their website or send curriculum resources out to families in a way that they would present them to educators and people who are experts in education. And that's not an appropriate way to address this. It really needs to be addressed in an accessible way and make sure that families are included. I know I talked a little bit earlier about inclusion and equity, and making curriculum available and easily understood to families and the community is a huge part of making schools more inclusive and more equitable in the distribution of that information. As curriculum resources change and schools adapt, it's also important that they continue to educate families. For example, if a school district was implementing a new elementary math program, it would be important that they educate families in the implementation of that program and that they set aside time to be able to do that, and also ask questions of those families and see what they're wondering and see what they want to ask about. Really engage them in a conversation rather than just providing them with information. I think that's the missing part that's in a lot of districts currently. They're only providing families with information and they're not really engaging them in a conversation. I've seen this done very well by engaging families in curriculum nights, literacy nights, math nights, where students and families are invited into the school, something that hasn't happened this year, but we'll definitely have an opportunity for in the future. And this is an excellent way to engage the entire community, educate the entire community, and have an open dialogue, an open conversation with them about curriculum and why it's so important.
Fantastic. Our second clip comes from Lauren Liljegren on what 2 improvements she would make if she were to be elected.
So there's a few things there. One is that at least this past year and perhaps in years prior, we've approved and ratified contracts that I don't believe were in the best interests of the children and families of Medfield. The existing school committee has 7 years of unanimous votes. And I joke all the time, my family of 5 can't decide what shape of pasta to have. So I struggle with how 5 adults from different households who don't speak outside of school committee meetings have so few follow-up questions and always seem to have the same opinion. I don't see the discord that I would expect. I don't see the follow-up questions. I don't see the debate that I would expect to see in a group of 5 people managing a budget of $40 million with all these competing interests. The second piece is we do have 6 open meeting law determinations in Medfield specific to the school committee. And, you know, open meeting laws are complicated and some of these are small infractions. But to be clear, these aren't complaints. These are the actual determinations made by the AG's office. The Board of Health doesn't have any. The selectmen don't have any, and none of our surrounding towns have any. So that seems noteworthy to me. It also comes at a cost of $40,000 to taxpayers, right? Because in all of these cases, the existing school committee has chosen to fight these complaints versus simply admit wrongdoing, right? It's complicated, everybody makes mistakes and move on. So I think that's concerning to me that we're sort of not, I'd like to spend Medfield's money as I'd spend my own. And I don't know that I would spend $40,000 on a lawyer if in the end I knew I had made an ultimately small infraction with really very minor consequences, if any consequences.
Lauren makes 2 excellent points there. The conversations between school committee and their unanimous votes, it's unusual that a school committee would have so many unanimous votes and agree on such a wide variety of topics for such a long period of time. School committees are made up of a variety of people from a variety of backgrounds. Ideally, there are people who are experts in different areas, and I think our school committee really has that now, and that they should be able to engage in a conversation and respectfully disagree. And I do not see that either. Like Lauren said, they engage in conversations, they ask questions, but typically the votes are unanimous. And they are in alignment with what the district proposes. It's really important that school committee members not only ask questions, but ask the right questions. When I'm thinking about how I would serve on a school committee and the type of questions that I would ask, both follow-up questions to information provided and questions about the budget, policy, and other aspects of being on a school committee, I think about my experience in education, both as a teacher and as an administrator. And I have firsthand experience in schools every day. So it's not just about asking questions, it's about asking the right questions that get to the root of the problem or issue if there is one. In relationship to a budget, it is essential that school committee members understand each line item of the budget and that they're able to understand what each line item of the budget looks like in practice in a school every day. That's something that I would bring to the table if I was elected. I really have a deep understanding of the line items of a budget and how a fiscally conservative budget can be maintained and how we can make the best of the resources that we have. Lauren also makes an excellent point about her
The 6.
yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Yeah.
About the 6 meeting violations. Excuse me. It's completely inexcusable that there are any meeting violations. When school committee members join a school committee, and the Medfield School Committee as a part of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, they receive training as part of that association, and that the fee that they pay that association and that membership allows them to train their members. Part of that training is on open meeting law. Because of that, assuming that all of our members are currently trained on the laws and the guidelines around open meeting, there shouldn't be any violations. Like Lauren pointed out, this is unusual to have so many, if any at all. Even one would be alarming. Other town groups do not have any open meeting violations, and it's unusual that a school committee of all the town organizations of elected positions would have these open meeting violations. It's really important that our school committee members are receiving that training and that they're understanding it fully, and if they don't understand it, that they're getting the resources and training that they need to be able to avoid those open meeting violations. Like Lauren pointed out, it's a financial burden on the town. It's also just inexcusable as far as the way that the meetings are conducted and the inclusive nature of the meetings and the way that we're presenting the school committee to the town community.
All right. It should be noted, there's a lot of information packed into these comments.
Yeah.
And so, if this were a live debate, you could ask me to rephrase the question.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's fair for you to look to me and say, there was one more thing.
Thank you, Britt.
Absolutely. This third clip is your own comment on the social emotional effects on students after the pandemic.
Once the pandemic is over, I do think that there will still be lasting effects, for the foreseeable future. Like I said, some of those, inequities that existed are now larger. Some of those achievement gaps are now larger. We're really going to have to think about how, the pandemic and the return to school has affected the social emotional health of our students. Beyond the pandemic, beyond that return to school and those effects, those negative effects of the pandemic that will kind of play its way into school for the next couple of years. I do think that those things are still very important. The social emotional health of our students, especially in a high achieving school district like Medfield, is always a top priority for me. Yeah, so I've said this before in some of the articles that are on the patch. I've said this in some of my Q&As. I do think that Medfield is doing an excellent job supporting the social emotional health of their students, and I think that moving forward, that should continue to be a priority. The social emotional health of our students should be a priority because it's directly linked to their well-being as students, which is our primary focus. When we think about achievement in schools, you can't have high achievement without students who feel good about coming to school, who are excited about coming to school, who see the value in coming to school, see their value in coming to school, and also educating families about the social emotional health of their students. I think that Medfield has done an excellent job of this, and if I was elected to school committee, I would continue to prioritize this. It's an essential part of educating the whole child, not just focusing on academic excellence, but also social emotional excellence and how students apply their academic knowledge to their daily life, how they build social relationships with others and maintain those relationships, how they feel empathy for others. It's a really important part of educating the whole child, and schools have that responsibility to the community to educate students about social emotional health, educate families, and include them in that conversation. And I do think Medfield has started to do that, to include families in the conversation about social emotional health. I'm hoping that in the future, that can be something that they can do more and more as we think about the growing importance of social emotional learning and social emotional health in schools in the return from the pandemic, and how it's directly tied to increased academic achievement, both for students who are struggling in school and students who are not currently struggling and may benefit from more challenges. Social emotional learning is beneficial to everybody. Again, I talk about the budget a lot. It goes back to the budget, thinking about how we're prioritizing those line items on the budget, maintaining staff, training staff, offering professional development that enhances our staff's ability to implement social emotional learning. Teachers do an amazing job with this. I know that in a lot of elementary schools, including my own, we use a morning meeting model from a program called Open Classroom and Responsive Classroom. And it's amazing the way that students react to this. But teachers have a lot to do. They have a lot to do this year and past years, and then next year, as we think about returning, they will have even more to do. So it's not only our expectation that teachers are trained in social emotional learning and the social emotional health of our students, but that we offer our students and families additional supports through school counseling, social work, and different types of engagement opportunities for those families.
The next clip is going to be from Leo Brem on how the school committee reacted to the pandemic.
The work done by school committee and by the administration last summer to prepare our schools to be as safe as possible was, I don't think I saw any other school districts do as much as we did here to prepare our schools and make them safe environments. And I think that is evident in the number of people who chose to send their students back versus going 100% remote. That's an indicator of just how prepared we were to make our buildings safe, make sure we had protocols in place for cleaning, mask wearing, and so on, consulting with the Board of Health, following the regulations, and any type of new information released from the CDC or the state. All these items together fed into the decision making that we had to make and the negotiating that had to be done with the teachers union.
I think that the towns that had the safest and strongest returns of students relied on collaboration within the district. If we look at surrounding towns and how they started to bring more students back from a hybrid to a full in-person model, usually starting in the younger grades with kindergarten, first grade, and then moving up through the elementary grades. From September until now, I look at districts that had strong collaborative efforts, not only in the school, but with the surrounding community, with the Board of Health, with other school districts, schools that had strong relationships with their teachers' unions, schools where teachers were happy and felt safe and felt supported, and administrators worked with teachers to make them feel safe and supported. Same with families that felt safe and supported and felt like they could allow their students in kindergarten and first grade, which were some of the first grades to come back in the surrounding towns. And I didn't see that happen as quickly in Medfield as I did in the other surrounding towns. I think that a lot of people in other towns, they were able to collaborate. They were able to get very creative. I mean, I'm sure that people have seen pictures of classrooms on stages in cafeterias, classrooms being split, additional staff being hired, some of those classrooms with plastic dividers. There was so many creative solutions that allowed us to maintain a safe environment, follow the CDC and the DESE guidelines at the same time, and bring more students back quickly, especially those students in kindergarten and first grade, those students who it was really essential to have them back as quick as possible. I don't think Medfield did that as quick as they could have, and I suspect that was because of not as much collaboration as some of the surrounding districts. I was not in the schools throughout this process, and I don't have a firsthand knowledge of it, but I was in my school throughout this process, and I know that we were able to do it in a quicker fashion, maintain those safe guidelines, and we did it because we have strong collaborations. We have that culture of people working together to do what's best for students always.
All right, our next clip is from Lauren Liljegren on the return and recover from COVID-19.
I think for me, it's return and recover. We've always had an achievement gap in schools. It feels to me, and we don't have data on this, but I hope to get there, that the achievement gap is ever widening. And so I'd love to see a recovery plan that really calls out, how are we going to manage this? What about children coming in and who didn't need individualized education plans or 504s before, but maybe do now? And the summer slide is long documented. We've had limited in-person instruction for a year now. How can we use the summertime effectively to boost achievement? And one-on-one tutoring has long been understood to be a cost-effective way to immediately boost achievement. Let's look into that. So I'd like to see and be involved in hopefully the execution of, but if not, the development and execution of a recovery plan that really calls out to the community exactly what are we going to do to get everybody back at least to where we were, and hopefully even better.
So Lauren makes an excellent point about using the summer and using the time from now until students return again in September, bringing them back this year and thinking about one-on-one tutoring. Unfortunately, the budget in Medfield wouldn't allow us to reach all of those students who need to be reached and who require that additional one-on-one tutoring. It's just not possible to achieve that with that type of model. However, I do think that there are other things that we can do with the resources that we have, with the budgetary constraints that we have, to benefit all of our students and make sure that we're working to close that achievement gap. One of the things is creating new positions, adding counseling staff, adding school support staff, adding social working staff who can really work with a large group of students and families to support them throughout the return, throughout the recovery process. Another thing that I talk a lot about is differentiating instruction in the classroom, making sure that each student is getting what they need individually. This is something that has been a best practice in schools for a long time. It's not something that is unfamiliar to educators, but it will be more important now than it's ever been. When we think about differentiating instruction, we're thinking about the way that we present curriculum, assessment, and we're thinking about the products that students are creating in class to show their knowledge. We need to think about each individual student. And in order to do that, it takes teachers a little bit of extra time, and they sometimes require additional resources. And both those things require additional funding. In my opinion, that would be a really smart place to spend money, thinking about professional development of how our teachers, the most important part of our education system, can work with our students to differentiate instruction, to reach every student, to make sure that they are achieving and making progress based on their own individual learning style.
Fantastic. And the last comment is from yourself. It's you on the experience needed to join the school committee.
In the past districts that I've been a part of, even though not in an administrative role or not in a school committee member role, I've really been engaged in school committee and kind of keeping track on what's going on. School committees are generally pretty small in Massachusetts districts, between 5 and 7 members. In Medfield, you have 5 members there, and I think what you're really looking for in a successful school committee is a diverse makeup of people from different backgrounds that really represent the community and represent the best interest of students and families. In my current role, I'm able to do that very well and think about how schools run, the budgetary concerns, the day-to-day operations, curriculum, and the way that we implement it. And by being in schools, working with students in classrooms, on the phone with families, engaging in the community every day in a different district, I'm really able to see kind of how that works and sometimes how it doesn't work. And I think I bring that knowledge to the role of a school committee member. I don't think it's a necessary prerequisite to being a successful school committee member, but I surely think it helps. And I think that every school committee really deserves someone who has experience in education, in schools, and really can call themselves an educational expert. So like I said there, it's not essential that a school committee has an educational expert or someone who has educational experience. But in my past experience, I've learned that school committees that do have teachers, administrators, special educators, support staff, anyone who works at all in a school, they benefit from that firsthand perspective. Even though those people are working in different districts, they're able to apply that knowledge of their work in schools every day to their role as a school committee member. One of the things that I can talk about a little bit is the respect that I have for teachers. Teachers are the most important part of our education system. I have experience as a teacher, I have experience working with teachers, and I have nothing but respect for teachers. I want to be able to support them, and I do think that my work with teachers and my experience as a former teacher allow me to find ways to best support them and really think about what they need to be able to support students. Throughout the pandemic, I do know that people have become really angry with education systems. There's been some misdirected hostility at schools and teachers, and I think that's really unfortunate. As a school committee member, you are the voice of the school community and the surrounding community, even the community who doesn't have children in the schools. And as a school committee elected official, I would have that voice of the community. And with that voice, I would advocate for our students first and foremost, but also our teachers in the community, because they are the ones who are educating our students. They are the ones who are with our students every day, and we need them, and we rely on them, and they deserve the respect that they haven't necessarily gotten throughout the pandemic. In some of the surrounding communities, school committee members wrote letters of appreciation to the school community and the teachers in the community. And I thought that that was such a nice gesture, and it showed that they are representing the community, and I think the community is overwhelmingly grateful for our teachers and everything that they do every day. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the case for everybody in the community, but school committees speak on behalf of the majority of the community and thinking about the respect that those teachers deserve. And I personally really appreciate everything that teachers do for our students every day. And they truly are, and I'll say it again, the most important part of our education system.
Robert, I'll invite you to have a final say, a closing statement. Why would someone vote for you? And on, I believe it's March 29th. Why should someone come out and vote for you?
Thank you, Brett. Yes, it's like I said before, it's my experience working in schools every day that really sets me apart in this election. I do think that I share a lot of the same views as the other candidates, but when we're thinking about the return to school process and the recovery of our schools, both academically and social emotionally, I have that firsthand experience working in schools with students, with families, with teachers every single day, and I'm able to apply that firsthand experience to school policy, budget, thinking about different types of issues like bus fees that I talked about earlier. I have firsthand experience dealing with all these issues. I'm also thinking about all the unexpected challenges that we will have moving forward and how I will have firsthand experience dealing with those unexpected challenges that came from COVID and came from our time away from full in-person learning. I call myself an educational expert, and I stand behind that. And I do think that although it's not a prerequisite or a requirement for being on a school committee, our school community and our school committee deserve someone who can call themselves an educational expert and really think about what's best for students and how to achieve that in our schools.
Robert, let me first just say thank you so much for joining us today. This is not easy. This was not an easy process. I think we really challenged our candidates definitely during this process here. This interview is not an easy one to be able to react like that. So thank you so much for joining us. I feel like you've done a really great job representing yourself and hopefully, for yourself, representing our community going forward. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Brett. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. So March 29th is the election day. Make sure you get out there and vote. You're now educated. You know who you're voting for. You know what you're doing. So get out to the polls. And if you need to know what is on the ballot, make sure you also check out our What's on the Ballot, also coming out soon. So thank you so much for everyone watching. That was Meet the Candidates with Robert Work.